Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Welcome to the press conference of the Philippine Statistics Authority para sa 2022 fourth quarter performance of the Philippine economy ngayong ika-26 ng Enero taong 2023. Ako po si 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐬, ang inyong host para sa press briefing na ito. Ang event po na ito ay naka-livestreamed sa PSA Facebook page at ang mga updates naman ay tweeted sa PSA Twitter account gamit ang hashtag #PHGDP. Ikinararangal ko pong ipakilala sa inyo ang ating mga resource persons para sa press conference ng 2022 fourth quarter performance of the Philippine economy. Sila ay sina Secretary 𝐅𝐨𝐮𝐫𝐭𝐡 ng National Economic and Development Authority at si National Statistician and Civil Registrar General Undersecretary Dennis S. Mapa ng Philippine Statistics Authority. Nais din po namin kilalanin ang presensya ng iba pang mga opisyal ng NEDA at PSA na kasama po natin ngayon. Mula po sa NEDA, kasama po natin sina Undersecretary Joseph J. Capuno, Undersecretary Melbourne Zero D. Pana, Assistant Secretary Sarah Lynn Daway Tucanes, Director Nerissa T. Isguera, at Director Desiree Joy O. Narvaez. Mula naman po sa PSA, kasama natin ngayon ang OIC Deputy National Statistician ng Sectoral Statistics Office, si Dr. Divina Gracia L. Del Prado, at kasama rin po natin ng Assistant National Statistician for Macroeconomic Account Service, we have Ms. Vivian R. Ilarina. Ngayon, atin na pong pakinggan ang ulat ni PSA Undersecretary Dennis S. Mapa.
Magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Ang Philippine Statistics Authority ay malugod na mag-uulat ng estado ng ekonomiya ng Pilipinas sa ika-4 na quarter at sa kabuuang taon ng 2022. Ang Gross Domestic Product o GDP ng Pilipinas ay nagtala ng pagtaas na 7.2% sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022. Ito ay mula sa naitala na 7.8% sa parehong quarter noong nakalipas na taon. Ito rin ay ang pang-7 consecutive quarter na paglago ng ekonomiya mula sa ikalawang quarter ng taong 2021. Sa kabuuang taon ng 2022, ang GDP ay nagtala ng pagtaas na 7.6%. Ito ay mula sa naitala na 5.7% noong taong 2021. Ang Gross National Income o GNI ay nagtala ng pagtaas na 9.3% sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022. Gayon din, ang Net Primary Income from the rest of the world ay tumaas ng 57.5% sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022. Sa kabuuang taon ng 2022, ang GNI ay tumaas ng 9.9%. Samantala, ang net primary income ay tumaas din ng 76.4% para sa kabuuang taon ng 2022. Sa seasonally adjusted national account sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022, ang GDP ay nagtala ng pagtaas ng 2.4% quarter-on-quarter growth. Sa kabilang dako, ang GNI ay nagtala ng 3.3% quarter-on-quarter growth na paglago sa parehas na period. Sa mga pangunahing sektor ng ekonomiya, ang industry at services ay nagsipagtala ng pagtaas na 4.8% at 9.8% respectively sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022. Samantala, ang agriculture, forestry, and fishing ay nakapagtala ng pagbaba ng negative 0.3% para sa fourth quarter. Sa kabuuang taon ng 2022, ang agriculture, forestry, and fishing, industry, at services ay nakapagtala ng pagtaas na 0.5%, 6.7%, at 9.2% respectively. Sa seasonally adjusted basis naman, ang industry at services ay nagsipagtala ng mga pagtaas na 1.5% at 3.5% respectively sa quarter-on-quarter na basihan para sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022. Samantala, ang agriculture, forestry, and fishing ay nakapagtala ng pagbaba na negative 1.7%. Sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022, ang per capita GDP ay tumaas ng 5.7% mula sa naitalang 6.4% sa parehong bahagi noong nakalipas na taon. Ang per capita GNI at per capita household final consumption expenditure ay parehong nakapagtala ng pagtaas na 8.0% at 5.7% respectively. Sa kabuang taon ng 2022, ang per capita GDP, per capita GNI at per capita household final consumption expenditure ay nakapagtala ng pagtaas na 6.3%, 8.6% at 7.0% respectively. Sa naitalang pagtaas ng GDP na 7.2% sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022, ang services sector ay nagtala ng pinakamataas na contribution na 5.8 percentage points. Ito naman ay sinundan ng industry sector na nagtala na contribution na 1.5 percentage points habang ang agriculture, forestry, and fishing ay nakapag-ambag ng negative 0.03 percentage points sa kabuuang pagtaas ng GDP. Sa paglago ng ekonomiya na 7.6% sa kabuuang taon ng 2022, ang agriculture, forestry, and fishing, industry at services sector ay nagsipagtala ng contribution na 0.5% para sa agriculture, 2.0 percentage points para sa industry at 5.5 percentage points para sa services sector. Sa 16 na sektor ng GDP, ang accommodation and food service activities ay nagtala ng pinakamataas na paglago na mayroong 36.1% sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022. Ito ay sinundan ng mga sumusunod: transportation and storage na tumaas ng 19.2%, other services na tumaas ng 18.3%, at education na tumaas ng 11.3%. Para naman sa kabuuang taon ng 2022, ang accommodation and food service activities ay nagtala ng pinakamataas na paglago na mayroong 31.8%. Ito ay sinundan ng mga sumusunod: other services na tumaas ng 28.3%, transportation and storage na tumaas na 23.9%, at construction na tumaas ng 12.7%. Sa mga sektor naman na may malalaking contribution sa pagtaas ng GDP sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022 ay ang mga sumusunod: wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles na nag-ambag ng 1.7 percentage points, financial and insurance activities na nag-ambag ng 0.86 percentage point, at manufacturing na nag-ambag ng 0.85 percentage point. Para sa kabuuang taon ng 2022, ang may malaking contribution ay ang mga sumusunod: wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles na nag-ambag ng 1.6 percentage points, manufacturing na nag-ambag ng 1.0 percentage point, at construction na nag-ambag ng 0.8 percentage point. Sa demand side, ang imports of services ay nakapagtala ng may pinakamataas na paglago sa antas na 47.4% sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022. Ito ay sinundan ng mga sumusunod: valuables na tumaas ng 30.4%, exports of services na tumaas ng 21.9%, at exports of goods na tumaas ng 10.6%. Para naman sa kabuuang taon ng 2022, ang imports of services ay nakapagtala ng pinakamataas na paglago sa antas na 42.2%. Ito ay sinundan ng exports of services na tumaas ng 20.2%, construction na tumaas ng 12.7%, at durable equipment na tumaas ng 9.3%. Para sa ika-4 na quarter ng taong 2022, ang mga sektor na may pinakamalaking contribution sa pagtaas ng GDP sa expenditure side ay ang mga sumusunod. Households final consumption expenditure, nag-ambag ng 5.3 percentage points. Net exports of goods and services na nag-ambag ng 1.5 percentage points at construction na nag-ambag ng 1.1 percentage points. Para sa kabuang taon ng 2022, ang may malaking kontribusyon ay ang mga sumusunod. Household final consumption expenditure na nag-ambag ng 6.1 percentage points. Construction na nag-ambag ng 1.7 percentage points at government final consumption expenditure na nag-ambag ng 0.8 percentage point. Ang Philippine Statistics Authority nagagalak sa inyong pagdalo sa National Accounts Press Conference para sa ika-4 na quarter at kabuang taon ng 2022. Inaasahan naming muli ang ating pagkikita sa ika-11 ng Mayo 2023 sa pag-uulat ng estado ng ekonomiya ng Pilipinas para sa unang quarter ng taong 2023. Muli magandang umaga sa ating lahat.
Maraming salamat po, 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐬, para sa inyong ulat ng 2022 fourth quarter performance of the Philippine economy. Ngayon, atin naman pong pakinggan si Secretary 𝐅𝐨𝐮𝐫𝐭𝐡 para sa pahayag ng NEDA ukol sa 2022 fourth quarter performance of the Philippine economy.
Fellow Filipinos, good morning. I am pleased to announce that the Philippine economy's growth remains robust as the government continues to intensify its efforts to restore the economy to its high growth trajectory, creating more and better quality jobs and speeding up poverty reduction. Our improved COVID-19 risk management and the easing of mobility restrictions have created positive economic outlook, boosting economic activity and creating more jobs despite external winds or headwinds. We have drawn upon the lessons gained almost 3 years into the COVID-19 pandemic. Our strong economic growth performance for 2022 proves that our calibrated policies and strategies have helped put us on the path to recovery and on track to achieving our aspiration for an inclusive, prosperous, and resilient society by 2028. As reported by national statistician Dennis Mapa, the Philippine economy grew by 7.2% in the fourth quarter of 2022, exceeding the median analyst forecast of 6.8%. This robust fourth quarter growth implies a 7.6% full-year growth in 2022 that exceeds the Development Budget Coordination Committee's target of 6.5 to 7.5% for the year. Among the major emerging economies in the region that have released their fourth quarter 2022 real GDP growth, the Philippines grew the fastest, followed by Vietnam at 5.9% and China at 2.9%. On a seasonally adjusted quarter-on-quarter basis, the Philippine economy expanded by 2.4%, driven by increased economic activity, mainly from pent-up demand, as the economy fully reopened in the last 3 months of 2022. Our robust performance in the fourth quarter reflected strong domestic demand, with 3/4 contributed by household consumption and almost a fifth by investment. The improvements in labor market conditions, increased tourism, revenge and holiday spending, and resumption of face-to-face classes supported growth in the quarter, further reflecting a solid rebound in consumer and investor confidence in the economy. The growth in domestic demand was met by expansion in the services and industry sectors, with production in most of sectors back to their pre-pandemic levels. Services growth was mainly driven by wholesale and retail trade, while the expansion of manufacturing and construction subsectors supported industry growth. In contrast, agricultural output slightly declined in the fourth quarter, highlighting the need to strengthen the sector's productivity and resilience against natural disasters, animal diseases, and climate change. Nonetheless, economic growth came with more jobs. We saw vibrant labor market conditions, with the country's unemployment rate down to 4.2% in November 2022 from 6.5% in the same period in 2021. This performance marks our lowest unemployment rate since 2005. We also observe an improvement in the quality of employment relative to the same period last year, as more workers found remunerative and stable work in private establishments and became employed in full-time jobs. With the resumption of face-to-face classes, the boost in the activities of small and large enterprises alike, and the resurgence of local tourism causing ripple effects towards the recovery of all the other sectors affected by the pandemic, we are confident that we will remain in our high growth trajectory. More importantly, through the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028, we will ensure inclusive growth that creates more and better green or resilient jobs to enable Filipinos to improve their quality of life. Inclusive growth across the archipelago will be our vehicle for reducing poverty incidence from 18% of the population in 2021 to a single-digit level by 2028. As global and domestic headwinds persist and keep commodity prices elevated, protecting the purchasing power of Filipinos and ensuring food security remain at the top of the government's priorities. We will continue to support consumers in affected sectors through the extension of reduced tariffs on various products, facilitation of an accessible food supply chain, reduction of transport and logistics costs, and other measures to cushion the impact of inflation on the purchasing power of households. Signed by President Marcos Jr. in December 2022, Executive Order Number 10, Series of 2022, extended the reduced import trade duties on key commodities, namely pork, rice, corn, and coal, until December 31, 2023, to help provide diversified sources of food and agricultural inputs in the short term. Complementarily, the Department of Agriculture's Agribusiness and Marketing Assistance established more Kadiwa outlets in Metro Manila, providing affordable agriculture and fishery products to ease consumers' difficulties in buying essential food commodities. These measures notwithstanding, we recognize that ensuring lasting food security means transforming and boosting domestic agricultural production. As such, the government will focus on modernizing agriculture and agribusiness through farm mechanization, research and development, enhance interagency linkages to create and diversify higher value products. Likewise, the government will continue to prioritize the creation and adoption of climate and disaster resilient technologies, alongside the development and mainstreaming of early warning systems and anticipatory mechanisms that are imperative if we are to achieve and sustain gains in the agriculture and fishery sector. By implementing the strategies identified in the PDP 2023 to 2028, we will protect Filipinos' purchasing power and strengthen food production linkages and ensure nutrition improvement across all ages. An economy is only as dynamic as its people. To ensure that the Philippines reaps the demographic dividend, we will prioritize policies to develop our human capital stock further, improve worker productivity, and promote measures for the efficient movement of people by reducing transport costs. The revised implementing rules and regulations of the Telecommuting Act, which considers the evolving nature of work, is expected to encourage the further implementation of alternative work arrangements and consequently reduce commuting costs for workers and address the traffic situation in NCR. Significant structural reforms recently enacted, such as the economic liberalization laws and tax reforms, will also help attract investments to the country and boost job creation in the near term. With more businesses recovering and adopting digital processes, we expect to see demand for technology-adept workers expand further in the coming years. Our participation in the recent World Economic Forum proved fruitful as we showcased the Philippines as a prime investment destination in the ASEAN region. Given our relaxed mobility restrictions, sizable domestic consumer market, and skilled labor force, now is the most fortuitous time to invest. We are more open now than ever for businesses to thrive in a wide array of industries: energy, water, logistics, transportation, agribusiness, infrastructure, manufacturing, tourism, health, education, and digital connectivity. Good governance, particularly strong rule of law, is also necessary for creating an environment conducive to promoting investments. In revitalizing our investment climate, the government is committed to ensuring that our regulations are transparent and conducive to long-term investment decisions. Indeed, the development challenges we face are complex. While we worked hard to make the PDP 2023 to 2028 as comprehensive and holistic as possible, its implementation is proof of a good plan. In this connection, let me then take this opportunity to invite you to watch the live stream of the forum called From Plan to Action, the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 on Monday, January 30 at 1:30 p.m. on the NEDA official social media pages. We have invited the President himself and Cabinet Secretaries will share their action plans and address implementation issues. Representatives from local governments, the private sector, and civil society will join us. Amid global headwinds, the government remains vigilant and prepared for the long and arduous journey ahead of us. Our goal is clear. What we want is an inclusive, prosperous, and resilient society where no one is poor and no one is left behind. With the whole government working together in harmony and closer cooperation with the private sector, civil society, and development partners, we are determined to turn this vision into reality. We will continue to collectively strive for a matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay para sa lahat ng Pilipino. Thank you and a pleasant day to all.
Maraming salamat po, Secretary Balisacan. Before we proceed, we would like to acknowledge the presence of PSA Assistant National Statistician for the Social Sector Statistics Service, Ms. Vilma A. Guillen, and OIC Assistant National Statistician for the Economic Sector Statistics Service, Ms. Rachel Laksa. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagdalo. Okay, so now let's proceed to the open forum. But bago po natin simulan, nais po muna naming paunlakan at pasalamatan ang lahat ng press at media partners na kasama po natin ngayon. Para po sa maayos na pagsasagawa ng ating open forum ay narito po ang ilang mga paalala. For our online participants, maaari po ninyong gamitin ang raise hand feature ng Zoom kung nais po ninyong direktang magtanong sa ating mga resource persons. Kapag kayo po ay natawag upang magtanong, pakisabi po muna ang inyong pangalan at organization na inyong kinabibilangan bago po ninyo banggitin ang inyong tanong. Maaari rin po kayo magpadala ng inyong mga katanungan gamit ang Zoom chat, pero siguraduhin lamang po na naka-indicate ang inyong pangalan at organization. Panatilihin pong nakamute ang inyong mga mic kung kayo po ay hindi pa natatawag upang magtanong. Now for our on-site participants, pakitaas lamang po ang inyong kamay kung kayo ay may katanungan at hintayin lamang po na kayo ay ma-acknowledge upang magtanong. kapag kayo po ay natawag, pakisabi po ang inyong pangalan at organization before saying your question. Now, for the press kits, ipapadala po namin ito sa online media participants via email. Samantalang, ang printout po ng press kit ay ibibigay po ng aming staff sa mga on-site media participants. Okay, so yun lamang po ang ating mga paalala. Ngayon, handa na po ang ating mga resource persons for the open forum. Maybe we can start with the advanced questions po. We have a question sent by Ms. Prime Sarmiento of China Daily. The questions are for Secretary Balisacan. For the first question, how would reopening of China economy impact the Philippines' economic outlook for this year? For her second question, how would increased tourism and the commitment to import durian affect the Philippines' economic growth in 2023?
The opening of China's economy is surely a boon to the Philippine economy, considering that the economy is fully integrated, strongly integrated with the China economy. As you know, we exports to China and we imports intermediate goods from China as well as consumer goods, and also with this mobility improving in China, we would expect also our tourism sector to benefit from that. And with respect to durian, we certainly are expanding and welcome that development, the interest of China to import durian from us. We are a major producer of durian, and many areas of the country are also potential for durian. So we will welcome that development, and we hope that beyond durian, we can also continue to expand our agricultural exports to China.
Thank you, Secretary. Okay, we have another question. This time it's from Ms. Eileen Mencias of Abante. This is sent via Zoom chat. Two questions for Secretary Balisacan. First question po, paano po maiuugnay ang pagbaba ng taripa sa corn, pork at iba pang agricultural products sa pagbagsak ng sektor ng agrikultura? Follow-up question, paano po maiingganyo ang produksyon ng agrikultura kung kulang po ang suporta at binubukas pa ang merkado sa imports?
Ang una nating unawain ay ang pagtaas ng mga presyo, no? As we know, last year and up to these days, we are challenged by disruption in the supply chains. Prices for agricultural products in the world markets have risen, and at the same time, also our domestic markets for agricultural products are also disrupted by animal diseases, by typhoons, and logistics, no? And so there are shortages, and those shortages, both in the local economy as well as in the global market, led to unprecedented increases in prices of agricultural products in recent decades, no? So ang mga presyo matataas na, at so kung hindi natin if we allow the reduced tariffs to now reach higher levels by not extending that EO that we referred to earlier, then prices will be even higher, no? So by yung sinasabi nating we keep the tariffs for corn, pork, and other products at reduced rates, does not mean na yung presyo of these products will fall, because the prices are much higher than what they were before 2019, no? Or 2020. So yun, so I think that's a misunderstanding. by keeping those prices or the tariffs at reduced rates, we are reducing the prices of agricultural products. Hindi ho, ganun ang ibig sabihin yan. Ngayon, yung pagbukas ng imports ay kinakailangan naman ito kung talagang kulang yung supply relative to demand, no? So, kasi kung hindi tayo naman mag-import despite the huge gaps between what we can produce and what can be what is demanded by the market at affordable prices, sisipa ng mga presyo at the whole economy, the consumers will suffer as a whole. So binabalanse natin 'yon kung ano maganda sa ekonomiya, ano maganda sa sa population as a whole, of course, with that in view also of protecting our farmers.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Okay, we have a question from our media partner at the second row at the back. Okay, sir.
Sir, good morning. 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐬, 25. I would like to address my question to Secretary Balisacan. Sir, anong magagawa ng NEDA dahil mismong si Pangulong Marcos nagsabi ang problema pati sa presyo ng itlog tumataas, yung problema natin sa sibuyas bagamat dumating na yung 5,000 metric tons na inimport pero hindi pa rin nakikita yung pag-stabilize ng presyo ng sibuyas and other agricultural commodities because of the so-called smuggling activities.
Gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, yung pagtaas ng presyo in recent months, no, ng mga agricultural products ay largely due to insufficient supply, no, relative to demand. Saka yung sa global marketplace din mataas din ang presyo. Now sa ekonomiya naman natin, gaya ng sinabi ko, we were adversely affected by typhoons, by animal diseases, and also to some extent our inability to bring in the imports at the time that when they were most needed, no? That is during lean seasons, no? Siyempre ang mali yung pagdating ng imports kapag harvest season na, no? Kaya dapat minamanage natin mabuti yung supply and demand situation para darating yung imports when they are most needed. That is when harvest is not in yet and the supply of commodities is getting tighter relative to demand, no? So hindi naman tama na kahit nabagyo na, nasira ng mga crops natin, kulang na kulang yung demand, pag tumaas ng husto ang presyo at hindi pa rin tayo mag-import, mali naman yun dahil that will not only hurt our consumers but the economy as a whole. Can you imagine, halimbawa yung mga food manufacturing industry natin na magsasuffer because they could not get affordable and reliable supply for their manufacturing activities, no? At saka yung mga consumers who could not now get those products at a price that they could afford, no? And as a result of yung mga ganong matataas na presyo, may mga secondary effects na yun. Workers will now begin to ask for higher wages. Industries, yung mga products produced by manufacturing are now going to adjust upward. At so yung inflation magiging spiral na yon. At kapag magiging spiral na yon, that will keep also the central bank, worry because then they will have to tighten the money supply and that means higher interest rates. So napaka importante na makontrol natin mamanage natin properly yung inflation by ensuring that we manage supply and demand properly, no? So at saka yung inflation napaka-importante yung food dahil almost 50% of our CPI, no, na nakabase dun sa food and related products, no?
Sir, just a follow-up. I'm particular with the onions kasi in-approve, kayo yata sa NED ang nag-approve yung 20,000 metric tons of importation ng onions. Pero papasok tayo sa secretary sa harvest season ng mga locally produced na onions natin. Ito kasi yung reklamo ng mga taga Nueva Ecija na why the government allowed the importation of onions, papasok tayo sa harvest season.
Ganito nang nangyari, no? If you look at the years before last year, no, 2021, nag-i-import naman tayo ng mga onions, no? At usually yung import na yan pumapasok or nadidecidean way before harvest, no? But last year kasi ang nangyari, hindi tayo nag-import when we were supposed to import dahil then lalo pang na aggravated yung problema nung sabay sunod na yung typhoons na sunod na occurring one at a time, one after the another, no? So nangyari maraming nasira na tanim, no? Without importing, so ngayon, ang taas ng presyo, di ba? At saka kahit naman harvest ngayon, dahil hindi naman maraming natamaan during the planting period, kulang yung harvest. Kulang yung harvest. So ngayon, of course, mas maganda sana nga talaga kung dumating yung imports noong pinakalin nung when prices were reportedly reaching 300, 400, 500 pesos per kilo, no, di ba? Then things would have not gone that bad. Pero yun, kulang na kulang, so kinakailangan tayong mag-import.
Sir, one last question.
Pero ang lesson talaga doon, if I may, no, ang lesson talaga doon is dapat proactive tayo sa pag-monitor ng merkado. Dapat malalaman naman natin kung within the year may expected shortage, no? Dahil alam naman natin kung ano yung ilang hektarya ba ang nataniman, ilang hektarya ang na-harvest. So a few months before the harvest, may predict naman yun kung may talagang kulang . And then that will help us decide kung mag-import tayo o hindi.
Okay. One last question, Secretary. May we know the forecast of the economic team of the present administration with regards to the GDP and inflation rate this year?
For this year, in consideration of the situations outside the Philippines, no? Ina-expect kasi natin na and the World Bank, IMF, and many others are expecting a sharp slowdown in the global economy, no? In fact, recessions ang ina-expect sa mga other na mga iba, no? And so we would our economy is connected with the global markets, so we're likely to be affected as well too, no? So given that, and plus the other challenges we are facing ngayon sa inflation and interest rates, our economy is expected to grow at a rate slower than we had last year. That is 6 to 7% this year, as opposed to the 7.2%, 7.6% that we achieved last year, no? But the 6 to 7%, if you look at the forecast for other countries, that's still a very respectable growth, no, for the Philippine economy if we achieve that, and we are quite certain that the prospects are good despite these challenges, particularly sa inflation.
Thank you, Secretary. Okay, let's accommodate another question. The lady beside Mr. Vic.
Yes. Hello. Good morning, Secretary Balisacan. My question is addressed to you po. Sir, I'd just like to know what are the factors that would explain why the full year growth in 2022 exceeded the DBCC target? Is it because of stronger household consumption and infrastructure spending?
For 2022,
Yes, sir.
yes, I think again, looking back, our economy in 2020 contracted sharply, and we had quite a long period of strict mobility, and so when we opened up the economy gradually in 2021, that began to improve, and as we relaxed further these restrictions, particularly mobility restrictions, there's so much pent-up demand, particularly sa trade, retail, consumption in general, and that significantly improved economic activities. And as I mentioned earlier, you can see that as of November 2022, the labor market was quite robust. Unemployment was so low, unemployment rate, its lowest since 2005. But of course, we are not completely happy with that yet, because we do know that there's so much space for us for improvement, to not necessarily just to reduce unemployment rate, because unemployment rate is already very low, even compared to many developed countries, but to improve the quality of jobs, to improve the quality of jobs, the availability of high quality employment opportunities, and that means investment. You cannot improve the quality of jobs without substantially raising investment levels, and that's why we're going around to market the economy, that this economy is a good place to do business with, and that means investment. Without those investments coming in, we'll not be able to produce and sustain the quality jobs that we have.
Sir, just a follow-up lang po about inflation. When do you see inflation peaking? Do you see inflation further easing maybe in the second half?
That's our projection, and that's what we are working very hard to get that inflation level lower, and such that by the second half or by the end of the year, the inflation should be in the order of 4.5% from where it is now.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Okay, before we call on the media partners who are raising their hand, let's entertain some of the Zoom questions. This is for Yusek Mapa. The question is from July Rada of Manila Standard. When was the last time GDP grew faster than 7.6% on a yearly basis?
Okay, it's we have to look at the time series. The 7.6% growth rate for the full year of 2022 is the highest since 1976 under the 2018 base year. That time in 1976, the GDP growth was recorded at 8.8%. For the GNI, so we also reported that the GNI grew by 9.9%, and this is the highest since we reported the GNI in year 2000. The time series for the GNI started in year 2000. So highest GDP growth of 7.6%, highest since 1976. That time 8.8%, and the 9.9% GNI was highest since the start of the series in 2000. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek Mapa. We have another question here for you, sir. The question is from Ted Cordero of GMA News. How much is the value of the economy in peso terms in the year 2022? And can you please give the values for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021?
Okay, for the value of the GDP in current peso for 2022, it's estimated to be at 22.02 trillion current prices. In 2021, this is estimated at 19.41 trillion. So the increase in current prices is about 13.5%. In 2020, this is 17.95 trillion. And in 2019, 19.52 trillion. So those are the numbers of the GDP in terms of current prices. Thank you.
Thank you po, Yusek Mapa. Okay, let's accommodate the media partner who is raising his hand at the last row on the left. Can you please hand him a microphone? Thank you.
Hi, Secretary Yusek. Jason Rubrico po ng SM9 News. Sir, pwede niyo po bang maipaliwanag bakit po tumaas ng 7.2% yung GDP for the last quarter of 2022 despite po sa mataas na inflation rate, 8.1 noong December 2022? Thank you po.
I'll explain siguro yung mga nag-contribute doon sa pagtaas ng GDP. So yung 7.2% na growth rate ng ating fourth quarter, as I mentioned doon sa report kanina, ang malaking nag-contribute dito ay yung household final consumption expenditure. So ang growth niya ng fourth quarter ay 7.0%. So yung contribution niya doon sa 7.2 na overall GDP ay mga nasa 5.3 percentage points. Ang malaking mga sa subsector ng ating household final consumption expenditure, ang malaking nag-contribute dito sa growth rate ay una yung restaurants and hotels. No, malaki itong pagtaas ng fourth quarter, no. Ito ay na-record natin na umangat ng mga 24.7%, no. So we saw during the fourth quarter, we have a lot of our kababayan na nagta-travel, going out. So yung mga food consumed outside the household, ito talaga yung isa sa mga nag-contribute. Yung food and non-alcoholic beverages, tumaas din ng mga 3.8% under uli sa household final consumption expenditure. And then yung miscellaneous goods and services, tumaas ng 7.1%. So yung source nito ay dito sa expenditure side on the household final consumption expenditure. Thank you.
Yeah, let me add also that when you look at consumption or demand, mga factors that determine that demand, number one is yung prices nga na mention nyo. So you would have expect that demand would have fallen, because prices increased. On the other hand, income has increased. Remember that in the November 2022 labor force survey indicates a very low level of unemployment rate, lower than its lowest since 2005, as I mentioned earlier. So there's a lot of employment, income generating activities going on at the time. So that raised the demand, and then there is that, so yung sinasabi nating pent up demands na people just wanted, after being away from the activities like restaurants, going to restaurants, going for leisure, just wanted to go out and spend whatever savings they have. So that's the other one. But clearly, if not for the relatively high inflation, elevated prices during this period, growth could have been higher by another perhaps 1 to 2 percentage points. Maybe our macroeconomists like Sarah Dawai here at NEDA will confirm that, how sensitive overall consumer demand is to inflation, to prices. The other thing that I should mention is that yung domestic demand na sinasabi natin is consists of your household final consumption, yung investment, at saka government final consumption. Yung investment and government spending also contributed to that positive growth, although at a much smaller rate than in the previous year.
Thank you, Secretary Balisacan and Yusek Mapa. Okay, we will entertain another Zoom chat question. This is from Ms. Eileen Mencias of Abante. Are you comfortable? Oh, sorry. This is for Secretary Balisacan. Are you comfortable with the Philippines' reliance on imported food at a time when even first world countries, including Singapore, are moving to improve their own food production? Perhaps you can share with us po, Secretary, why or why not?
No, clearly, our trust is to increase the productivity in agriculture because we believe that there is so much room for improvement there. No? We have, I keep on mentioning that we have neglected agriculture, and that neglect is shown in the very low productivity that we get from a hectare of land, no? From the low incomes that farmers realize from farming. When you raise productivity, that raise total production even with a shrinking land or even with the same size of land, but that also will reduce imports. No. On the other hand, if for certain commodities where we can't produce enough and that demand is rising fast, as what one might expect now that our economy is growing fast and we can't seem to produce to grow our agriculture that fast, can't have we don't have any resort but to import, because if you don't import, you also hurt consumers, and worse, you hurt the growth itself, because then the growth that we are seeing is not going to be sustainable. If that high inflation will lead into higher interest rates, that's what can dampen demand and investment. So, you know, we have to look at these issues in a broader context.
Thank you so much, Secretary Balisacan. Okay, Ms. Paris Umali is raising her hand.
Good morning, Secretary.
Good morning.
Morning, Secretary Balisacan and Undersecretary Mapa. Ms. Umali po from GMA 7. Sir, firstly, I understand that you've mentioned a while ago that this 7.6% full year growth is the highest since 1976. But just for the record, is it safe to say that we were able to hit the target for the whole year? And also, is it safe to assume that we have gone back already to the pre-pandemic levels in terms of growth and volume?
Well, let me answer that first. No? Then Dennis could. Insofar as the achieving what the levels that we had in pre-pandemic, that's 2019. Insofar as per capita income is, which to me is the most relevant reference, no? Because our population is growing, so it's not enough that our economy is growing. You know, that our economy must be growing much faster than our population. No? But so if you, on a per capita basis, we actually haven't fully recovered yet the 2019 per capita income level. So we are not there yet. But in terms of the volumes of economic activity, for many sectors we have recovered already, but some others, particularly in the trade, I think we haven't. Tourism is obvious, no? We haven't recovered 8 million tourists pre-pandemic, and so on. So it's kind of a mix, depends on the sector where you're looking at, but broadly, we are still on this phase of recovery.
All right. Sir, just a follow-up. With this growth, is it safe to assume that this will be felt by the ordinary citizens, considering that they are also forced to spend more because of the very high prices of commodities? And also one last, what other industries are we focusing on for the year 2023? Thank you, sir.
Yes, we understand the dynamics here, that prices, particularly prices of essential goods, no, particularly food, are so crucial in determining whether the economic growth is inclusive or not, no? And that's why our preoccupation, where it's a high priority for us to get those that inflation under control, reduce it to a much lower rate than what it is today, no? So that's why earlier I said that we expect that the inflation will start coming down this year, and will hopefully that by the end of the year will go to 4.5%. That way, rapid growth and low inflation will contribute significantly to inclusivity, especially that we are focusing on the creation of quality jobs for our workers, not only the skilled workers, but even semi-skilled workers. We're focusing on modernizing agriculture so that productivity will rise there. And of course, you know that it is in agriculture where most of the poor are dependent for income. So if we can raise productivity there, that substantially will impact them and will reduce poverty there, will broaden the benefits of growth to those populations.
Thank you po, Secretary Balisacan. Okay, let's call on the guy at the third row, please. The left. Yes, him.
Good morning, sir. Ramon Roendo of Philstar.com. I just want to ask, analysts said consumers are funding revenge spending activities by drawing down on their savings. Is the government worried that this could increase Filipinos' vulnerability to potential shocks to income? The government doing anything to prevent household savings from drying up, considering the projected global recession?
Excuse me, what's the question again? Sorry.
Sir, is the government worried that this could increase Filipinos' vulnerability to potential shocks to income? And is the government doing anything to prevent household savings from drying up, considering the projected global recession?
Yes. Again, the whole one of the focuses of our PDP is to making our population, our economic sectors resilient to shocks, no? Especially that is those coming from climate change, no? Now, we need to invest in technologies, appropriate technologies to make our those sectors of our economy vulnerable to shocks more resilient. With respect to savings, of course, we expect savings to go down when there are shocks, because that's the part of the coping mechanisms of population everywhere. But on the other hand, we expect those shocks to be short term, so that recovery can come faster. And we are committed, government's committed to insulating as much as possible our population from shocks. As you will see in our advocacy and in as reflected in the PDP, we are aiming at strengthening our social protection system, so that those who are most vulnerable to shocks can see that their well-being will not be adversely affected as they go through those shocks. No? If people have better access to insurance, for example, health insurance, and family members get sick, when people can claim unemployment benefits, when they lose their jobs, and so on. No? A strong social protection system is much needed in this country, and that should help address issues related to shocks.
Thank you po, Secretary. Okay, let's call on our media partner wearing gray shirt, the gentleman in the gray shirt, and then from CNN.
Good morning. Ralph Rivas from Rappler. Circling back to household consumption po, is this debt-driven? Nangutang po ba yung mga households to spend, or did they use up their savings? Or do you attribute this to just the high employment rate? And a follow-up to that would be, how sustainable is this high growth? Especially, we have figures like underemployment remaining in double digits, and inflation estimated by economists as likely staying above target in 2023. Thank you.
Yeah. As I said earlier, our high in our priority in the near term is to address the inflation issue, because indeed that impact on your savings, that impact on your purchasing power, and in the longer term that can also impact on the economy, adversely negate what we have achieved in recent years, no? So we will address and we are addressing the inflation issue. I've enumerated earlier some of the things that we are doing, and on Monday we will actually, our various agencies will actually tell the public what they are doing or what they plan to do in the near term and in the near term, as well as the medium term, to address those issues, no? Particularly the most immediate issue on inflation.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. Let's call on our media partner from CNN.
Hi, good morning, Secretary Balisacan and Undersecretary Mapa. You have a sterling economic performance there last year, overshooting the economic team's official target, but agriculture or farm output was a drag. The sector declined, partly the reason behind the supply shortage and its consequent inflationary effects. Secretary Balisacan, you did specifically say, and I quote, dapat proactive tayo sa pag-monitor ng merkado. Malalaman natin kung within the year, kung may expected shortage. And Secretary, that's full of wisdom because you're an expert in agriculture economics, being a consultant for the World Bank and the ADB. Do you think it's about time that the President appoint a new Agriculture Secretary? And would you consider that post given your credentials, Secretary Balisacan?
You know, the problem of agriculture, as I mentioned earlier, is quite has a long history. No, the problem, the inflation there, it's just now a manifestation or an outcome of what the problems ailing our sector. No, as I said earlier, the sector has to be modernized so that productivity can improve. And with the increases in productivity, you would expect prices to or pressure on prices to rise, to be lower. No? Now, there are the sector has many issues, many problems, and these have to be addressed, particularly investment issues and governance issues in the sector. There are also institutional issues, and so the president he said would be in a better position to address some of these issues. As he also himself said, they would not expect to stay there for the long haul, but hopefully we can get a full-time agriculture secretary then. But in the meantime, I think we just have to attend to those many problems there in agriculture.
If I may ask a follow-up question, what are the top issues you think that the president or the agriculture department should address? Because the president did say that before he chooses a replacement, he has to sort out the big issues. And as an agriculture economy secretary, what do you think should be the first to be prioritized?
I think that for one, we are looking at modernizing the sector. So what that means is ensuring that our farmers would have access to modern technologies, modern inputs. They would have access to logistics. They would have access to improve access to markets. And those require investments, no? And so, a president sitting as Department of Agriculture Secretary would be able to influence better, this flow of investment, particularly, lobbying for bigger budgets for productivity enhancing interventions for agriculture and agribusiness. No? So that's one investment, no? And if I look at our agriculture, for example, one wonders why we are surrounded with water, right? But we can't access that water for the farmers' irrigation. Why? Because we are not building good enough irrigation systems, right? And for those irrigation systems that we have, we are not even able to maintain them well, so that water is not there when farmers need the water. There are many interrelated problems there. So irrigation is one. As I mentioned already, logistics. One thing that you notice, for example, is the prices that are paid by the consumers are very high relative to the prices received by farmers for their products. Why is that? Right? It's part of that is the very high intermediation cost. Part of that is due to the lack of post-harvest facilities like cold storage and warehouses, for example. So one would ask, why are we not investing, or why is the private sector not investing in this kind of projects that would have prolonged the life of agricultural products and therefore reduce costs or reduce wastage? Second, the third that I see is what I mentioned earlier as understanding supply and demand. No, agriculture is not so complicated when it comes to supply and demand. You would know, and we should be able to predict quite well what the supply is, what the demand is in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year. We know and we have good idea of what hectareage farmers are plant with certain crops, what hectareage are harvested, what is damaged by typhoon. If you get those information and demand is relatively stable, that's the easiest to estimate. So I don't understand why we cannot predict well and estimate well what the gaps are in terms of the level of imports that we need to bring in to stabilize prices, for example. And why do we need to bring in those imports when farmers are harvesting? If you plan well, then you should be able, those imports should come in when farmers are not harvesting. That's when you are in lean season.
Right, Secretary. So you think the Agriculture Department then is not doing its job properly, given the shortcomings?
What I'm saying, these are long-term issues. They've been there long before the pandemic, long before, and we need to really get our acts together there, govern the sector well, depoliticize it, so that our technicians, our specialists, our agricultural experts can do their jobs well.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. Nais po namin ipabatid sa inyong lahat na nag-exceed na po tayo sa oras for this press briefing. Kung kaya't siguro huling 4 na tanong na lamang po ang pwedeng ma-accommodate ng ating resource persons. So we have here 2 questions sent via Zoom chat, and then we will call on 2 live questions po. Sa mga tanong po na hindi na ma-accommodate ngayon, maaari po ninyong ipadala sa ating mga staff dito or ipadala sa aming email. And for those joining us on site, pwede po kayong lumapit sa registration booth kung saan may PSA staff po na maaring kumuha ng inyong mga tanong. Okay, and the response of our resource persons po ay ipapadala po sa inyo via email. Okay, so for our questions sent via Zoom chat, the question is for Secretary Balisacan. In the 4 decades now, poverty remains a challenge in our country. What sector in your mind should be prioritized? Moreover, are we still in the transition period? The question po is from Mr. Rodel Suarez, sent via Facebook Live.
Okay, that's a topic that I really love talking about. I've worked on for so long. Now, poverty, you're right. Poverty has been a major problem in our country. Our neighbors have achieved so much progress in reducing poverty, and there are two reasons. First is that our economy has not, over the last 4 decades, has not performed as well as our neighbors. We lag far behind our neighbors in terms of the pace of economic growth. So the slow pace of economic growth is one. The other one is that even for the growth that we have achieved, we could have realized higher poverty reduction than what we actually did. And the reason for that is the sectors that you would expect to generate that poverty reduction did not perform well. And I mentioned agriculture earlier, no? Where agriculture is where you find most of the poor are, and that's typical of most poor countries, developing countries. They're very much dependent on incomes from agriculture. So when agriculture is not performing well, it's lagging behind the rest of the economy, then you would expect poverty to persist. The second element there is, if you look at historically at countries that have succeeded in reducing poverty substantially, it is that these countries are able to generate high quality jobs outside of agriculture, meaning as their economy develops, they're able to generate high quality employment opportunities outside outside of agriculture, and that typically is the manufacturing, where the demand for semi-skilled labor is growing. And when that happens, many of these poor in rural areas go to these employment opportunities, and that deliver high quality poverty reduction. Okay, so if you look at our economy, we don't see that kind of economic transformation, or we see it very slowly, that the generation of high quality jobs outside of agriculture is occurring at a very slow pace. That's why in our PDP 2023-2028, we are focusing on that economic transformation that will generate high quality jobs. And this constraints the problems that have baffled our or that have been faced by our economy all these years are already well identified. They are well known. These are the high cost of doing business, in our economy, the low investments in power, in energy, in infrastructure, the governance issue, our institutions, but those things that we can do easily, like addressing infrastructure issues, energy issues, if you address those issues, then would be able to also bring in the investments. Of course, we can also use those investments to address those issues, right? Particularly those infrastructure, and that's why we are going around and say, look, there are so many opportunities for investment in the Philippines, including addressing our bottlenecks like infrastructure, power, logistics. And because if we do that, if we are able to do that, then we create a lot of employment opportunities for our people, particularly our poor, this semi-skilled workers. So yun. We need to grow the economy fast, and we need to ensure that that growth is inclusive by creating those high-quality jobs. That's what. There's no other trick to poverty reduction than that.
Okay, thank you so much, Secretary Balisacan. Mr. Ted Cordero from GMA News sent a question about the reasons why the fourth quarter GDP still grew over 7% despite high inflation. I believe this was already answered by the Secretary. So, okay, let's call on another media partner. Ms. Kai Ordinario po.
Hi, sir. Good morning po. Sir, Secretary Balisacan, sir, yung performance natin for 2022, how is this going to affect yung targets that will be set by the DBCC later on? Are you going to revise because of medyo mataas ang ating growth for 2022? Does that give you confidence that we can revise the targets upward? Thank you, sir.
If you recall, Kai, even in the early mid next year, was already saying that we need to keep the growth. There was a lot of pressure then to revise the growth downward, but they said no, it's achievable. We just have to focus on things that we can fix quickly. So we don't, and for the 2023 growth forecast, that the 6 to 7% is already a revised downward. No, we are initially eyeing for 6.5 to 8% for 2023. No, but we trimmed that down to 6 to 7% in view of the realities in the global marketplace, no, as well as the inflation and interest rates that we have. But as I said, we are determined to address that issue, particularly inflation, so that by the second half of this year we'll be able to move to a higher growth trajectory. By 2024 to 2028, we are aiming at 6.5 to 8% growth.
Sir, just to be clear, no change
No
for
change.
2023?
No, for 2023,
Three.
no, I don't
No
think.
change.
I don't think so.
Thank you, Secretary. Okay, last question po from Mr. 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐿.
Good morning, sir. Just to amplify Ralph's question earlier to Secretary Balisacan. So, household consumption was pretty strong in this last quarter and the previous one. So, do you see this holding up this year, or do you see a point where households will tighten their belts due to high prices?
Yeah. The truth is that inflation has usually a lag effect, no? Siguro mga 6 months yun. No? So the high inflation that we are seeing today will impact on the first quarter and second quarter, and that's why we have reduced the growth forecast for 2023 to 6 to 7% rather than the 6.5 to 8%. So we have taken care of that already.
Okay, sir. And then aside from inflation, what other challenges are you seeing on the consumption front? Especially you mentioned earlier that we are part of a global ecosystem, diba? So what's your outlook on, for example, remittances will that affect severely the savings of our kababayans and their purchasing power as well?
Yeah, I would expect that that remittances, with the opening up of many countries already, with the restrictions, mobility restrictions now much relaxed, I think remittances would remain strong. But again, if you look at the PDP 2023 to 2028, our focus is on creating high quality jobs here, so that our kababayan would not have to see employment abroad as as a forced situation for them, no? Just to earn a decent income. So if they can have their jobs here, the better. But of course, in the meantime, because you don't expect miracles that all these quality jobs will suddenly occur, and not in the thousands but by the millions, that of course will not happen overnight.
Sir, last na lang, yung pent-up demand. When something is pent up, di ba, the tendency is after some time it fizzles out. So do you see that happening this year?
Yeah, I think last year that has surely has come in, and there's probably some of that still this year. But I think it's more than the pent-up demand. It's the high growth. 6 to 7% still a large. It's still quite high. And with inflation going down, that should improve the purchasing power of our people, and that would raise demand.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Balisacan. Okay, so dyan po nagtatapos ang ating open forum. Nais po naming pasalamatan ng ating mga resource persons, led Secretary Arsenio M. Balisacan at PSA Undersecretary Dennis S. Mapa. Maraming salamat din po sa ibang mga opisyal ng NEDA at PSA na kasama natin ngayon. Gayon din po sa ating mga media partners na nakilahok sa press conference na ito ng PSA para sa 2022 fourth quarter performance of the Philippine economy. Pero bago po kami magtapos, inaanyayahan po namin ang lahat na panoorin ang event ng NEDA na pinamagatang From Plan to Action, Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 Forum. Ito po ay gaganapin sa paparating na Lunes, ika-30 ng Enero taong 2023 sa oras na 1:30 po ng hapon. Masusing tatalakayin ng forum ang Philippine Development Plan o PDP 2023 to 2028 na sumasalamin sa mga polisiya na alinsunod sa development agenda ng Marcos administration. Kasama ang mga iba't ibang cabinet secretaries at miyembro ng pribadong sektor, malalaman dito kung ano nga ba ang mga programa ng ating mga ahensya at ng pribadong sektor na sumusunod at sumusuporta sa PDP sa layunin nito na magkaroon ng matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay ang bawat Pilipino. Mapapanood po ang PDP Forum sa pamamagitan ng live stream nito mula sa opisyal na Facebook at YouTube account ng NEDA. At dyan po nagtatapos ang ating press conference. Sana po ay patuloy po ninyo kaming suportahan. Maaari po ninyong bisitahin ang PSA website sa www.psa.gov.ph for more updates. Muli ako po si Anjay Cardon ng PSA. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat.